Hey, Jamie, aren't you supposed to be moving right now?
I am moving.
Oh. Jamie, you sound different.
Matt's coming.
Oh, fuck. All right.
You guys really need a truck in your intro.
We'll get you out here, man. Hey, Matt, you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's kick some ass.
All right.
Let's go. Hello and welcome to Talk Heathen. I'm Eric Murphy.
That's a lot more work than the intro to the Atheist Experience. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Welcome.
Today is March 31st, 2019. It is Season 3, Episode 13, and Matt,
today is a special day because it is the Trans Day of Visibility.
And, so I don't want to take anything away from that. It is the Trans Day of Visibility, and I'm really, thank you for bringing that up.
Not only that, but I made a post about it. And I'm raising money for the Trevor Project. So go over to my Facebook page, donate to the Trevor Project, read what my trans friends have to say on this Trans Day of Visibility, because that's the most important thing.
Also, while you're out and actively getting involved, wish him a happy birthday. Today's Matt Dillahunty's birthday.
Not just any birthday. I've reached one of those round numbers that everybody likes to make a big deal out of it, and I really couldn't give a shit about. But I'm 50 today.
Dang.
I know.
Dude.
If you look this good at 50, don't praise Jesus.
Dude, I'm excited that you came out. Last weekend, Jamie and I were talking to a caller, and I was starting to get frustrated, and I lost my cool in a way that I think it's okay to get angry when somebody is not listening, when someone's talking over you and things like that. I think that's understandable. But I don't know if that's exactly what I want to do, especially because I know that you do it very, very well. And
sometimes I do it very, very poorly.
Yeah, true enough.
You can't host a show for 14 years and not screw a lot of stuff up. We were talking, at some point, we're going to do a video, maybe as part of a new show, as the kind of the mailbag type thing that we talked about. But it got to be about how and why I make decisions about interrupting callers on the show. Because in normal conversation, or like in a structured debate, everything is I talk, you talk, and it's all moderated. And in a normal conversation, you would try to be respectful and interrupt as little as possible. On a call-in show like this, where there are 6 lines and multiple people waiting, you have a different job, and that is to make sure that one person isn't monopolizing the show, that they're not taking up time from others. And if the conversation isn't going anywhere, it's our job to make sure that, okay, let's table this, call back next week, or don't ever call back if this is just the way things are going to be, and then we'll move on to another call. But the reason for interrupting on my part is to make sure that the conversation goes as well as it can, which is we need to get a definition, or I've asked a question and I want an answer to that question and not an answer to somebody else's question. It's difficult kind of making those decisions and running a show, and we're not always going to get it right.
Well, and you got it right, and I just want to emphasize the pacing piece. If we're not pacing the show, nobody else is. We're the ones who are trying to make sure that we're coming out with a good product. Speaking of pacing and all of that, I'm taking a look at the lines. We have one theist on the lines, a couple of atheists, but we do have some lines open. So if you'd like to call, please, now's the time to call. 512-686-0279. That's 512-686-0279. We do like talking to atheist and theist callers, but I want to get some more theists calling in. So if you're religious, if you have a religious family, tell them to call in now, because now is the time. And for those people who say, oh, you're so selective, you only pick, the ridiculous callers who make bad arguments. No, those are the only ones who call in.
That's my favorite complaint. I'm like,
you
emailed to tell me that we're only talking to people who aren't very good at defending their faith. So why didn't you call in?
Yep.
Why didn't you have your pastor call in? We're happy to take all of them. We prioritize. There are atheists who sit on hold for the entirety of Talk Heathen and the entirety of Atheist Experience who may never get on the air because we have a priority for theists and we want to have those conversations.
Absolutely, because we want to show how they can be had, because not everybody gets to have those conversations. They don't get to have the opportunity to see what that looks like, and so that's kind of where we fill in. So before we jump into calls, I do have a couple quick announcements to make. The first announcement that I want to make is that we have a new channel coming out. I know. The new channel is going to be the ACA Speaker Series because we do a ton of stuff. We have amazing people out who come and not only do they guest on our shows, but they give talks. And so what we're going to do is we want to get that out for everybody to get to see. And so there it is up on the screen. It's the ACA Speaker Series. And kind of to kick that off, after the Atheist Experience this evening, we're going to stream the Atheist Day speeches. So if you didn't get to make it to Atheist Day, you want to see it, you want to see how it went. Mark really kicked butt on getting multiple video feeds. Mark, you're amazing. I saw you working really, really hard on it this last week so that we can have a really good product to show people. So
that's a fact.
Yeah, it is.
That guy's a bad mamma jamma.
Mark and Vern both are.
And other people, after putting on an event like this, I was unfortunately out of town and couldn't participate, but other people, after putting on an event like this, might package together a DVD and charge you to watch all this stuff. Atheist Community of Austin, this is important.
Yep.
And the mission is to get the word out, to have these conversations, to give people the toolkit that they need to be able to have these conversations as well, which is why, if you support what we do here, you should look into the various Patreon projects, both for Talk Heathen, Atheist Experience, etc.
Yep.
Because that's what allows us to keep producing all this media for free, doing the shows. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Actually,
we're going to do it even if you don't donate, because that's how important it is, but it's nicer when you do.
Well, and it helps us do things like Atheist Day.
Yeah.
So if you do want to support Talk Heathen, you can go to patreon.com/talkheathen to me. That's patreon.com/talkheathen to me. And right around the middle of this episode, just like every episode, we thank our top 5 patrons. And I do refresh it right before I do it. So if you want to become one of our top 5 patrons, we will thank you every episode right in the middle of the show. So please consider going to patreon.com/talkheathen to me. Every little bit helps because it helps us do awesome things like that. So we've got the ACA Speaker Series, Atheist Day footage is going on. The Atheist Vanguard is a rebrand and a retelling of some of our other shows. We've had the Preaching Humanist and we've had the Atheist Roundtable. And through sitting down and talking about how we can have these complex conversations, not just in this studio, but out on the street. Right? So they've been going out and talking to people on the street and then bringing that back. I think it's our most ambitious project yet because it is taking, recordings and stuff out all over the place, bringing it back and having those multi-piece conversations. So I'm excited about the Atheist Vanguard coming up. It's going to be coming up, premiering on April 7th. Let's see, what else? Next, I want to bring up the magazine, as always. We have a magazine now. It's called Thinking Aloud. And if you haven't signed up, check it out. If you need the link, you can go to our social media. You can go to the Atheist Community of Austin Facebook page and sign up to it. You can check the link in the show notes for this show. That should be in there. And I actually want to say welcome, Andrea, who is our newest staff member to the magazine.
Awesome.
Andrea Schlenker has been a really big contributor in the past and is now part of our volunteer staff. And Andrea, I just want to say welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. With that said, one more thing. American Atheist Convention's coming up, April 19th to the 23rd. If you like what Matt and I do, you want to see us, both of us are going to be live on the main stage doing a live show of the Atheist Experience and Talk Heathen. If you want to see us, come out.
And if you don't want to see us, come out anyway and just go get a drink and talk to somebody else during that time, and you'll get to see all the other cool stuff that's going on.
Oh, I'll be at the bar too, man.
Not while you're doing the show, I hope. Well,
no,
who knows?
Fair enough.
I might just sneak up a bottle of Dolce Vita tequila and turn the Atheist Experience into Matt's Drunk Fest.
Hey, I'm a gin man myself, but I know you like your Dolce Vita.
That's not the only thing that's wrong with you, but it's okay because we're friends.
Love you too, Matt. Happy birthday. I'm just going to leave that go. All right, so I think we've talked enough. I think it's time to jump into calls. So let's talk to Mark in Austin, Texas. Mark, you're right in our backyard. How are you doing today? Mark in Austin, Texas.
Hi, yeah, this is Mark.
Hey, you're live with Eric and Matt.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
What did you want to talk with us about today?
Well, I just had been diagnosed for colon cancer.
Oh, man.
And And like I said, I'm an atheist, and I'm really comfortable with that. I mean, I'm okay with it. But I've got a sister, and we had been estranged for several years, and, this has come along. She's a fundamentalist Christian, and we've been estranged partly because of my atheism and some other things going on. But I'm not going to get into that. But she's been contacting me every day since I've had the diagnosis, and she's come to visit me. I mean, those things are nice.
Yeah.
But she keeps bringing up
Mark?
so she can see me in heaven.
Oh, there.
And I have not been, the only thing I've done is say, it's okay, Connie. I'm right with God. It's all right. Don't worry about it. And it's just kind of hard to deal with. I want to say, Connie, I don't want to hear that.
Mark, you're well within your rights to be able to talk about your relationship with her and say, hey, I want to continue this relationship with you. I love when you visit, and I love you. That said, this is something that I really don't want to talk about, and I need you to respect that. You're well within your rights to say it. And if she has trouble with those boundaries that you've established, you can say, hey, if you're not willing to be respectful of the boundaries that I'm setting, I can't have you involved in my life. There has to come a time that, somebody needs to recognize that there's consequences to their actions, and that you can't force your relationship on somebody and force your religion down their throat all of the time. I'm sorry that you're dealing with that, man.
Yeah, this is something I'm actually going to be speaking about at the top of the Atheist Experience at 4:30, and I've already promised people I'm going to talk about it then, so I don't want to go through it all now. But these situations are difficult, and yours is easily more difficult than what I had to deal with this week. And I had to make a decision. I don't want to alienate family members unnecessarily, because these are people that I love and care about and who love and care about me. But I also can't allow people who are going to be a toxic, negative influence on my life to keep doing what they're doing. And so I have to set some boundaries. And it was, what I ended up doing was saying, hey, I'm happy to have conversations, but don't send me stuff like this again. And let's not go down this road over and over. And in your case, getting your sister to realize that you understand what her concerns are, and you'd rather not spend all of this time constantly rehashing that you're not doing this to hurt her. You're not doing this, as in any sort of negative way. You're just living your life. You are convinced of what you're convinced of, and you would like for these relationships, through the process of hopefully recovery, or for however much time you actually have left, to be focused on, the joys of life and interacting with people in a way that is positive. Because why would you, we all have misery in our life. You've gotten a terrible diagnosis, and even though what she thinks she's doing this out of love for your benefit, but if it's having nothing but a negative impact on your life, then you either have to get her to realize that she needs to stop that, or just have to cut off contact, because you can't keep having all the negativity, even if they think it's positive. And one of the things that I've done in the past is go to people who do things like this and say, okay, you believe there's a God, you believe this God cares about me, et cetera, you believe in the power of prayer and all this. Instead of coming to me with your testimony, instead of coming to me with your concerns, take it to God. It's his issue, and everything's going to happen according to his plan, and et cetera. And now our relationship doesn't have to be one of conflict. It can be one of love and family and appreciation, and you can take it all to God. He's the one who's supposed to care about this, and I'd rather just live my life and enjoy it and not have the conflict all the time.
Yeah.
No, actually, my atheism has been a comfort. I mean, I don't have to worry about, I was raised a fundamentalist Christian. I was a deacon in the church, just all of that. And about 15 years ago, I finally just saw, this is just not, well, it doesn't really matter. The thing is, I don't have to worry about all that. I don't have to worry about going before some judgmental God that, I don't have to worry about that, because all I know is one of these days I'm going to go to sleep. I'm not going to wake up again.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it'll be just like before I was born. And that's okay. I'm good with that. In fact, I'm real good with that.
Yep. I think you've got, an incredibly positive outlook on the situation. I share your feelings on this, that, I don't have a lot of the concerns and fears that I had when I was a believer. Just, you got to try and draw as loving a boundary as you can around your family members and get them to say, look, I just want you to respect my wishes about my life, and I'll respect your wishes about your life. If we can't do this cooperatively and with compassion, then we just can't do it. And the other day, like Friday, I had to make a decision because I was going to take an action that might have resulted in cutting someone out of my life, and I had to be okay with that as a possible result. And it turns out I was absolutely okay with it.
Yeah. And this is after a long time of trying to maintain those relationships. And unfortunately, in these situations, the onus gets put on us to be the ones who are kind about it, who are pragmatic, who are understanding and forgiving. And we're not going to tell you where that line is. You're welcome to draw that line where you feel necessary. I mean, I know that for a lot of people, it's a lot smaller. You don't have that big of a push. There are family members who will say, "Oh, God loves you," or "God bless," when they hang up the phone, or something like that. I'll pray for you as a reaction. And a lot of times, what may seem like proselytization is their way of saying, "I love you."
It's sometimes it's the only. What's that?
The God bless and those platitudes and those things.
Yeah.
But that really doesn't bother me. Somebody could say, God bless,
exactly.
I'll pray for you, and I'll say thank you.
When I talk about this, later today, you'll see that we're in the same boat, because a lot of it, sometimes it's just, I don't have any other language to express this. When you hear somebody is going through something difficult, I've heard, well, I'll pray for you, pop out of the mouths of atheists on occasion, because we don't always have the language to really deal with that.
And so don't jump. I mean, and this isn't specifically to you, Mark, but it's kind of advice to people, who are watching. The advice is don't jump down their throats, right away.
Until they deserve it.
Yeah.
Until that is exactly what needs to happen, when you've politely tried to say, hey, stop, hey, stop, hey, stop. And now it's like, okay, you're going to stop, or we're just not going to talk anymore because this is too negative. There's a pastor friend of mine who sent me a text message a couple hours ago that, was happy birthday and I love you and I'm praying for you. Am I mad at that person? Not really. It's a little annoying to kind of, twist the birthday into the time to do that kind of thing, but I understand where he's coming from. It's a little different from the birthday card that I received that I'll talk about later today. But the key thing is you get to set whatever boundaries you're comfortable with on your life. And for me, the balance scale was, is it going to be more sad for me to keep letting them do this thing that creates conflict in my life than it is for me to cut them out of my life so that conflict goes away? That's it. It's just a simple cost-benefit analysis.
What's strange about all this is I had not talked to her in maybe once or twice in 3 years, because she had decided and I had decided that wasn't a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Or I had decided, I got to where I just wouldn't participate. She would call with a bunch of negative stuff and I'd just hang up. I just didn't participate.
Yeah.
And now I don't mind the God bless her, I'm praying for you, or all that. I really don't mind that, because, like I said, I grew up with that, and it doesn't bother me that much. I know that it's meant in a positive way. But what bothers me is I want to make sure you're right with God, because I want to see you.
Yeah.
See you in heaven.
That is so.
I want you to be there with me.
It's almost a direct quote from the birthday card letter that's sitting over there. I mean, if you catch the Atheist Experience either later this afternoon or after it's recorded, you'll know that you and I are in the same boat in some regards. I will say, though, since you're in Austin, there's a community here. If you feel like coming on down to the building, getting up and about, interacting with folks, and if you need anything, there's a community of people here who are often eager and willing to help out, and we'd love to have you down sometime.
Totally, man.
I was down there one Monday and just kind of reading and talked to Mark a little bit, and I met Jamie and Claire came in, and then I got sick, and I haven't been back. So.
Well, anytime you feel well enough to come out, you're always welcome here, brother.
But I may just grab me a lift or something and come down there in a little bit. Just
sounds good.
Hang on.
There's people on the other side of the glass from us who are already smiling at that prospect. So.
Yeah. All right, brother. Well, we hope to see you a little later today.
All right.
All right.
Hey, and thank you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Man, yeah, it kind of is a good preface to the next call we're going to be taking, that people don't always realize that there is a negative side to religion, that it's not just, oh, well, I believe this and you need to be okay with it, because it influences all of your other choices. It influences how you vote. It influences how you treat your family. And it can be really, really detrimental. I mean, I've seen people lie about, last-minute deathbed conversions, so that they can try and comfort other family members. Oh, Uncle Joe was an atheist and he never really believed, but right at the very end, he privately told me that he gave his life up to Christ.
Yeah, I've left specific instructions with both my ex-wife and a few other friends, and I have this handy little cell phone device which has a video camera on it. If somebody happens to be near me at the time of my dying, they are to record it and post it publicly so nobody tries to pull that shit on me.
Yeah. And the other side of it is, you know what? I've gotten permission from family. I can share this. When my grandmother died, her funeral was turned into an altar call. And it was, you need to get saved right here and right now if you ever want to see her again. She's waiting and she's hoping that she's going to get to see you, and she's so sad that you're not saved. You need to come up and you need to give your life to Christ. That was the premise of the funeral.
Yeah.
And it made it so difficult for me to process those emotions.
That's been the premise of nearly every funeral I've ever attended, though.
It hurt. It hurt real bad.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm glad we get to bring it up, but I want to move on to Stephen in Reston. Stephen, you're live with Eric and Matt. How are you doing?
Not bad. How are you doing?
I got a quick question for you, Stephen. Where in Louisiana is Reston? Because I just drove through Louisiana twice this week.
I got you. So it's right on the I-20 corridor, kind of in between West Monroe and Shreveport.
Okay.
If you're going 70 miles an hour, you don't see much of it.
and also I wouldn't have seen any of it because I was on I-10. So.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah.
Well, what did you want to talk with us about today?
Well, I was talking with your call screeners, and I was kind of mentioning that my friend, he wanted me to call you guys. I don't actually know much about your show, but I am interested. But he's a fan, so he wanted me to call. And I guess my question for you guys, I've been told that you guys are atheists, right?
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So would either of you classify yourselves as anti-theists, perhaps?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is that there's a couple different usages of the term anti-theist. I mean, Hutchinson had one that I disagree with. I think his was better labeled anti-religionists. But
yeah.
And it just kind of depends. I mean, we both said yes fairly quickly, but it's worth pointing out that what we mean by that may not be the same thing as what somebody else understands. My take's really simple. I am not convinced that any gods exist. That's what makes me a non-theist or an atheist. For most of the gods that have been presented to me, if they appear to be falsifiable and in conflict with things that we know about reality, then I actively believe that they do not exist, the positive atheism thing. And for theistic notions that would expect reverence, worship, subservience, even if they were real and existed, I would be in opposition to those, which is one of the reasons why I would identify as an anti-theist. Because for me, anything that would truly be deserving of worship would never expect it in the first place. And so if a particular God was to prove to me right now that it existed, I would no longer be an atheist because I would believe that that God exists, but that doesn't tell you anything at all about whether or not I would worship it or revere it or respect it at all. I might actively work in opposition to it.
And I have a different working definition in my head. When I think anti-theist, Stephen, were you on hold for the last call? Did you hear what we were talking about?
I caught the tail end of it, but I wasn't able to hear the whole conversation.
No worries. So we were talking to a gentleman who was given a diagnosis, a cancer diagnosis. And instead of getting the love and support of a family member that they really care about, this person has instead decided that they wanted to hound him over getting right with God. And it was damaging. Mm-hmm. And we get those kinds of messages all of the time from people who, instead of being able to interact with their family treats them as a project, and it's no longer about the relationship, but about trying to convert them, and it's hurtful. It's damaging. And so when I think of anti-theist, I see the kinds of damage that religion does, right? It forces families apart. Every weekend I meet people who have been disowned by family members or disowned by their entire family. You know, this Thanksgiving and Christmas, I meet all of these amazing, wonderful, kind, incredible people who, you know, for one reason or another aren't able to connect with a family. And so we're kind of creating family for each other. In being an anti-theist for me, it's
I got you.
Trying to undo some of this damage. And then you have things like, justification of bigotry, right? You have people who are couching their bigotry like their, hate of homosexuality or
That's actually kind of close to me, you know.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. And so that would be the difference.
Just for clarity, so that we're not just sitting here defining ourselves by all the things that we're not. I'm a skeptic. I'm a skeptic, and I'm a humanist, and those two come before whether or not I'm a believer in any particular God or religion.
Okay, actually, that's actually an important clarification. I'm happy you made it, because here in Reston we have Louisiana Tech over here.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And there are actually a lot of Texan students that come over here, but that's another point. But anyway, I meet a lot of people here. I'm in a philosophy club and things like that. Just places that people can get together and things.
Sure.
And it's always interesting to me how a lot of people they pronounce themselves anti-theists or things like that, but they don't make that clarification that you just made. But that is like one of the things that that I hold, but it's not the first descriptor of myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
sure.
And
that you hold the anti-theist position?
No. He wasn't saying that he holds.
Oh, okay.
He was saying.
No. I meet people that are vehemently anti-God and anti organization and things like that, and they base their whole personality around that. And I don't think that's a peaceful way to live, so to speak.
I don't know. I would kind of push back on that a little bit, because, I mean, first off, I'm anti-God the same way that I'm anti, pick a fictional, bad guy, pick a Voldemort
More so.
Or Sauron or whatever.
More so, because Voldemort and Sauron don't have a contingent of people running around trying to tell everybody that they are the worshipers of the one true God.
But that's the point.
Making legislation that affects us all.
That's exactly the point.
So I am vehemently against religious privilege, superstition. I want all of those things anything that is not rationally supported by evidence needs to go away, because it is a pollutant that is poisoning our society.
But that doesn't mean that we're anti, the character of God as much as we are anti what people are doing because they're couching their faith or their bigotry or whatever the case is in that religion. So
and not against the people.
Yeah. So it's what people are doing in the name of that religion, right? It's the actions that are being informed by that faith that really kind of makes me, And I don't think that's a bad way to live, because the fact is in standing up for LGBTQ rights, we're creating a safe place for them here. You know, in standing up and saying, you know what, I'm not putting up with it. You know, a lot of people, while they lose their family, they come here and they get a new one.
Saying you're vehemently standing in opposition.
You're literally.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry.
You can portray anything. You can portray.
I'm sorry. There must be a delay.
Yeah, there is a delay. You can portray any of these things as negative. Mothers against drunk drivers are vehemently against drunk drivers, but they're on the side of righteousness in the same way that, you know, when I stand up against bigotry and privilege that is poisoning, there are people who could paint that as a negative. Oh, look how angry Matt is. And my response is, if you're not angry, you just aren't paying attention. But at this point, you know, because we've talked a little bit about us, I kind of just want to know where you're at and maybe why your friend asked you to call in.
Yeah.
Well, my friend wanted me to call in because he's a big fan of your show, first
Yay.
off. And second, I am a theist, but in a way, I'm very much anti, you know, organization of religion. I don't like the idea of you know, mass churches, you know, like these big organizations that, you know, take hold and they corrupt people's minds to believe one thing or another. You know what I mean?
Well,
I don't like that idea, and I don't like kind of what one of you said earlier about religious privilege, especially when it comes to government and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I don't like that idea, but I am a theist. I will admit to being a theist every day of the week.
Also, can I ask you, what is it about your religion that has you convinced?
Has me convinced to be a theist or to be anti-religion?
No, to be a theist.
Okay, to be a theist. Well, that is a difficult question. I'm sure both of you realize that, of course. But I would have to say that from reading the Bible, and solely that fact alone, I am a theist. I am a skeptic, by the way, and I feel like that's very important to say. Usually when I'm making introductions to new people or to new groups, you know, categorizing myself as a theist is one of the last things I do. You know what I mean? Like, well, that comes up weeks later when I get to know people, you know, for a while.
There's a curious thing for me, because I teach and I do a lot about skepticism. I have an entire touring magic show that teaches the foundations of skepticism. So when somebody says to me that they're a skeptic and they're a theist because they read the Bible, there's a massive disconnect there, because not only have I read the Bible and studied it and taught it, skepticism is this view that I will not believe something until there's sufficient evidence for it. And when you say that you're convinced because you read the Bible is the claim, it is not the evidence for the claim. And so if you read it and became convinced, to me, that's in conflict with good skeptical practices. So what was it about reading the Bible that convinced you?
Yeah, to be clear, you're talking to two people who've read the Bible as well and have come up with a different result.
Yes, of course. So, you know, I read the Bible, and I guess I completely understand what you mean by it is the claim to the Judeo-Christian, you know, God, as it were. It is the claim of what has happened or what is happening, so to speak. And truth be told, I mean, you know, I am a skeptic, but I do not know how to properly quantify my theism, so to speak. You know, and it is a contradiction that I'm willing to admit. You know, I'm willing to admit that I do not know certain things. And,
me too. I mean, I don't know is probably my favorite answer and usually the right one. But when I talk about this, I was a skeptic long before I was an atheist. But the reason that I'm able to say that is because I had not applied skepticism to my religious beliefs. My religious beliefs were a matter of largely indoctrination, and the people around me believed, and so it seemed reasonable. But when I tried to apply good standards of evidence to it, which is something that you really must do, What I found is that there isn't sufficient evidence to justify the claim, and that's the thing I'm trying to get, because you seem to give the impression that either you're a skeptic and you just don't know how to apply skepticism to the religious claim, or you're a skeptic who's applied it to the religious claim and it has come out warranted and justified. And if it is warranted, I would love to know, because I don't want to be wrong. That's what being a skeptic's about, is not wanting to be wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I am of the position of the latter, not the former. So I have applied my skepticism. Well, I won't say my skepticism. That gives like a twinge of subjectivism.
Yeah. No, I like that. Thanks.
I like the fact that I believe that I have objectively examined the claim that is the Bible and the claims therein.
And so what's the supporting evidence?
Not found them wanting.
How did
what's
you vet
the supporting evidence?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How did you vet that?
Yeah, what's the supporting evidence for the claims that you now accept?
Well, I mean, to say the least, talking to guys like you, I do enjoy talking to guys like you, especially face to face, and it makes me question what I believe, and I believe it's a healthy exercise. And the answer that I usually give is one that is, like I said, usually good enough. I was young. I'm still young, but I was younger rather, and I was heavily indoctrinated and things of that nature with my family and everything of that nature, and eventually, when I was young, tragedy struck my family. I lost my dad and things like that, and so right. I eventually started to rebel against indoctrination, things like that. But eventually, it kind of came back home to me. Once I had calmed down from my grief and things like that, and I actually, the answer that I usually give to people is I re-examined my religious beliefs with healthy skepticism.
Well, so you've said that already.
Hang on. For your own benefit, Stephen, when this recording, when this show hits the air, I'd like you to rewind back to where I said, what is the evidence that convinced you? And listen to your response, because nothing approaching evidence was ever presented. Like it was...
I'm actually aware.
Okay, so let's try this again.
But that's the only thing I care about.
Yeah,
I got you. Okay.
I mean, we would hope that whatever it was that convinced you was good and sufficient and would also convince us. And so while you're saying this, I'm waiting to hear that thing that will convince me. And if it wouldn't, then I'll tell you. Well, and I'll tell you, Stephen, my follow-up question after this is if it isn't convincing for me, why as a skeptic is it convincing for you?
Yeah.
So let's kind of double back again.
Right. Those are fair. Those are fair.
Yeah, what has convinced you? What is this supporting evidence? How did you vet it?
How did I vet it? Mm-hmm. So I see the correlation between reality and what is in the Bible.
How so?
In a manner of speaking. So when I see things like miracles being performed in the Bible, mm-hmm. I see human error, I see stories, and I see narrative. So when I see a miracle in the Bible, I realize that those things probably did not happen true to fact. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
Those things,
But that kind of stuff happens in a ton of books.
For a person to do these things.
I think you'll find that we're still...
the value of the narrative.
I think you'll find that we're still a long ways away from presenting evidence for a proposition.
Yeah.
So you started down this path of saying you see a correlation between what the Bible has to say and facts about reality, and I was eager for it to go down that route, and then you kind of veered off to the left to say, hey, when I see miracles in the Bible, I'm pretty much convinced they didn't happen. My thing is, of course, getting back to the point that you started to make, that I think you would make, of course we're going to see things in the Bible that correlate with issues in reality. Because if you're trying to figure out why are we here, why is there something instead of nothing, that's one of the things that religions propose. So to say that the proposed explanation of Christianity is at least consistent with reality is completely unremarkable. It's like if a murder was committed and I propose that the butler did it, that is entirely consistent. But the question is, what is the evidence that would lead us to reasonably conclude that the butler did it?
I got you. So the evidence, I would say, for the Bible, as it were, or any religious texts,
Okay.
I hold the personal view that the evidence is the narrative.
Okay, hold on a second. The evidence is the narrative. That's a little vague. Can you get a little more specific?
Absolutely. So I propose that the narrative, as it were, the stories that come out of religious texts, they help people.
But does that mean that they're true?
In many cases, they do not help people. But is it true?
Okay.
Yeah.
No. We got to stop. So you're advocating for, I'm asking for evidence, and you're advocating for the narrative. And then you point out that the narratives sometimes help people and the narratives sometimes don't help people. Isn't that what we would expect from any narrative? Isn't that going to be true for any text, not just a religious text, but a self-help book? Hell, Harry Potter books have helped people, because if you feel like you are the weirdo who's being excluded, now you have a champion and hero to bring you in to make you realize that you could be the hero, or you could be normal, you could be accepted. I can make this case for anything. The only thing I care about is, are the claims true, and why should we believe they're true? And we've gone on 3 or 4 different tangents now, and all I really want is, tell me what evidence convinced you. And if it turns out that the only thing that convinced you is that you found a compelling narrative, then I would point out as a skeptic, that is not evidence. That is, by definition, your emotional response to a text, a claim, and you are conflating that as if it's supportive of the claim. I can write a passage.
I've got the Book of Eric as a joke where we do that.
But I'm just looking for what is the evidence that should convince someone that a God exists.
This is a difficult question, of course, and I'm not trying to be pretentious or anything.
I don't think you are. I honestly, and I don't mean this in any insulting way, but I've done this show for
of course not.
14 years. What I'm seeing from you is the same thing I'm seeing from other people, because we're all convinced. Let me ask you this: what's it feel like to be wrong?
What does it feel like to be wrong? It feels bad, of course.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. That's the key. It feels wrong to it feels bad to find out you were wrong, but being wrong feels exactly like being right. We are wrong about countless things, and it feels like we're right. And this is what I'm seeing when I'm having this conversation with you is you are convinced of something and you think you have good reasons, but when asked for those good reasons, you keep giving bad reasons.
And as a skeptic, you can recognize that uncomfortability when you butt up against something that is contrary to the feeling, that you're right about this, right? When you start to question it and you're recognizing that, well, maybe the foundations aren't as solid as I thought they were. It is an incredibly uncomfortable feeling. And Stephen, I know you don't watch the show, so for your benefit, I'll tell you that feeling of discomfort, that's what discovery, that's where you can grow it. That's what Eureka feels like.
That's the skepticism in your brain going, hang on, you're not using me correctly.
Yeah, when Socrates said he's the gadfly stinging at the horse that was Athens, that sting, that's that feeling. that feeling of, that discomfort, there's pain there.
So let's try this again. What is the evidence that convinces you that there's a God that should also convince other people as well?
I'm trying to frame my answer in such a way.
Yeah, and by the way, if you don't have an answer,
you can call back.
Yeah, that's fine too. I would rather people take on board the discussion and go and think about it and come back with a good answer than keep presenting,
Yeah, and if you want to talk about it with other people, our Reddit has been exploding. So reddit.com/r/talkheathen. You can go to one of our numerous Facebook groups or our Discord. There are tons of people who would love to talk. Or if you just want to study and call back next week, I'd love to talk to you about it.
But if you want, outside of the narrative, which I think we would agree was written by human beings, and there can be plenty of narratives that are impactful, independent of whether or not what they point to is true, what would be the strongest piece of evidence that you found compelling?
Sure. And like I said towards the beginning, a healthy answer is I do not know.
Yep.
And I won't say that I do not wholly know. You know what I mean? I think I know.
Yeah, because that would be absurd. That would be absurd because then you would be claiming that you are convinced that something is true and unaware of why you're convinced, and that doesn't mesh with skepticism under any definition.
Exactly.
So,
I hope to hear from you again next week, man. Thank you for calling in.
Sure thing.
Thanks, Stephen.
All right, y'all have a good day.
You too. We've had some good calls. I like this. So we do have a couple more atheists on the line, and I've got some open lines. If you are a religious caller, call in. This is your time because we've got some open space. 512.
If you've been trying to get through to... Give the number.
512-686-0279. Going to put on the announcer voice.
But if you have
512-686-0279.
If you've been trying to get through the atheist experience and unable to get through, you have a friend or whatever that wanted to take me to task, or this is their chance. We got a couple open lines. Get them to call in.
Or if you don't care about the atheist experience, you like Talk Heathen more.
That's true too.
You should definitely call in and let us know.
Although
I will tell you, Matt, now that we've got a little bit of time, we got a $200 donation during that call.
Outstanding.
And we had several other people who were throwing in donations as well as, thank you. Thank you. If you'd like to donate, you can go to the live chat and toss that in. The person who donated the $200 was Travis Thompson. I had several people up who had also donated, and their names have fallen off, and I'm so sorry. But we had a few $6.66 donations. That's fun. That's fun. So thank you so much for doing that. I'd love to move on to Mathew in Spokane, Washington. Mathew, what would you like to talk about today?
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me well?
We can hear you fine.
Awesome. I just had a question about being a conservative atheist.
Okay.
Stop it. Sorry, that's a joke.
It's a joke. What about being a conservative atheist did you want to talk about?
Well, I personally am not a conservative atheist, but I was recently kind of kicked out of a Facebook group for supposedly atheism for defending people who support the president.
Okay.
Yeah. If it was my group, I'm not sure if I'd have kicked you out, but I don't think I care to spend much time talking to people who are defending the president.
Essentially what the defense was someone was scoffing at people who had MAGA hats on and calling them racist and stuff. And I was trying to defend the point that just because they support one political party a certain way doesn't mean that they are necessarily racist.
Yeah, so this is something I've talked about a bunch, and it's a big problem. And that's because there's a couple different connotations of the term racist. There's explicit racism, and then there's implicit racism, and people are using the word differently. And so if you're supporting an administration that is implementing policies that are explicitly or implicitly racist, then people on the left want to say, well, you're a racist. And then my friends who only understand one, they think you're only racist if you're burning crosses in people's yards. They're like, I'm not racist. I've got friends who have many different races and blah, 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 and I don't hate anybody. I just have these views and whatever else. There needs to be an explanation by people who are using a word in a new or non-standard way to say that, no, when I say that you're racist, I'm saying that you're supporting institutional racism, that you are supporting implicit racism, that you are supporting policies that have a disproportionate effect on minorities, and in that context, you are racist. I'm not saying that you're, a KKK member or, an anti-Semite or whatever else. And it's because they're using that same word in two different ways, they're never going to connect. Now, the thing is, I can understand people on both sides of it. I can understand the people who are going, well, I'm not racist, and the other people who are going, oh, yes, you are, and it's because they're using this term in different ways.
And if you're unwilling to have the conversation, it's understandable, but if you're seeing that and you're just using that as shorthand and being unwilling to have the conversation, you're not helping. If you want to have that conversation and have those nuanced pieces come out so you can be able to flesh that difference out, it comes from saying, hey, let's sit and talk about it. It's the same way that we're sitting here taking calls from people who we don't necessarily agree with so that we can flesh out the details of that conversation.
And I don't run around saying that they're racist, but if you're wearing a MAGA hat, I'll dump you in the basket of deplorables in a heartbeat because that's a general term.
No, and I completely agree that you're allowed to have your own opinion on people, even if I don't necessarily agree with it.
Yeah.
But the main thing that really was kind of upsetting was the fact that the group that I joined is the largest Facebook group for atheists in both my city and a neighboring city. And it has a lot of members in it. And that is personally my only way of really getting a group of people who have similar ideas without going to a group with about 5 people.
I've been kicked out of groups that I really wish I could have stayed in, and I've been kicked out of groups where I was happy to be kicked out. I understand it's frustrating that this might have been your one connection to local secularists. Maybe rather than just doing it on Facebook, go to some meetups and have conversations in person, which will often go far better than posting a comment in a limited forum where you're relying on text and where people who are angry and frustrated are going to be less charitable in what they read than they would be if they were, looking you in the eye and you were trying to explain this.
Well, my main point to the administrators who ended up contacting me was that if you exclude people who are of a different political party just because of their political leanings, or if you allow people to put stuff like this person is a racist because they are part of this group, then it damages the ability for people who already feel alienated by their groups or surroundings because they're an atheist, but then you're further alienating them from joining people who have similar ideas about God and beliefs and churches.
Well, they can also go form their own group as well. There are conservative atheist groups. There were, American Atheists, even despite what I would have done, has gone to CPAC a number of times to try to reach out to conservative atheists. I have a number of fairly simple, straightforward views because as somebody who used to be a full-on Rush Limbaugh ditto-head conservative, and now I'm pretty much the exact opposite of that, I've seen this from both sides, and the one thing that I hear from the conservative atheists is, well, they're fiscally conservative and they want smaller government, but they are socially liberal. And the response to that is, you cannot be socially liberal and fiscally conservative because now you have no way to pay for the things that you think are good.
Essentially what I was told was that being a conservative atheist is an oxymoron, which I partially agree with.
I would say conservative humanist.
Yeah, on the church-state separation thing, I can see where you're coming from. I guess the big thing that I would want to add to this is when I want to explore something, I will take the devil's advocate position if I'm not seeing that position represented, so I can flesh it out and understand it better. And if you're in a group that is up for doing that, then I would totally support that. But
although that makes you a sock puppet, which would get you banned from many different groups, unless you told them you're taking the devil's advocate side.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe that wasn't the right community for you, but I've said it once, I'll say it a million times. Everyone should feel like they have a place where they belong. So I wouldn't want every atheist group to kick out, conservatives. There has to be a conservative atheist group for those people to at least feel like they're not the only ones in the world, because we can talk about ideas. We can get together on ideas, and we can discuss them, and we can decide, how we're going to move forward as a society. But complete ostracization, that's rough.
It's not that. It's not that. It's a Facebook group. It's not remotely ostracizing.
No.
So
I know.
Take a look at the Atheist Community of Austin. I'm no longer in charge of anything here, but when I was and now, there's no restriction on somebody being a conservative atheist or Republican atheist, anything like that. Are you going to find a lot of people who agree with you here on those political issues? Almost certainly not, but that doesn't mean that it's an exclusion thing. So you may wind up, even without an explicit exclusion, wind up being implicitly excluded, and that's just the way it is. And so you're going to have to find the groups that mesh, and it's frustrating and irritating. But this is a community that we built with specific mission statements on a number of different things that we worked for years to get right. And if your views, not you in particular, Mathew, but I mean, if somebody's views aren't consistent with our mission statement, then this isn't the group for them. And as annoying and frustrating as it may be, these groups, even the ones that just say like atheist in the label, they're not just about atheism, because our lives are not just about atheism.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult. It sucks. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's a Facebook group. There's 25,000 more of them. They just may not be in, covering your particular geographic area. And worst case, you can create one.
True enough.
I think the main thing that really kind of upset me, though, about the situation was the fact that despite me not being conservative and also not even having voted for the president personally, I was constantly being called a racist and a bigot or homophobic.
Sure.
And the group that I was on was it was advertised as a support group for.
I get it.
Look, they're building the community that they want to build. I mean, as much as I think this has been a beneficial discussion to have, we're starting to get into the nuts and bolts of an issue that you had on Facebook that really doesn't make great TV.
I mean, I was called a Nazi sympathizer merely because I suggested that it was not a good idea to run around punching people in the face for sharing their Nazi views or sharing their racist views. And the fact that I wasn't willing to endorse people punching them in the face for speech, I was labeled a Nazi sympathizer by a couple people who've lost their fucking minds. And it was irritating for a while, but the truth is, the people who I care about and the people who are reasonable on these subjects did not align with those individuals who decided to call me this, because they recognized how ridiculous it was. And if you were making good points in defense of people, saying, hey, maybe calling them racist is the wrong thing to do. Maybe we need to educate them on these issues. Maybe instead of just like blanket dumping everybody into one group without thought, we can engage a bit more and maybe we can fix stuff. If those are the views you're making and those weren't well received, then maybe it's the group that's the problem, and then there's another reason to go form another group.
We hope that helps, man.
But it's kind of outside the bounds. I don't even spend time focusing on our own Facebook groups and stuff and the moderating and policies there.
Well,
I'm certainly not going to dive into policies on groups I'm not part of.
I'm actually the admin for our social media, and we have a pretty comprehensive, amazing team of volunteers. Definitely check it out. But we hope that helped, Mathew, and best of luck to you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You should add Mathew to one of our groups just so you can block him. I'm sorry. That was just funny.
Oh,
I don't see. And the thing is, over the course of that conversation, I don't know that Mathew and I fundamentally disagree on a number of things, because I've been incredibly frustrated by the way the conversations around politics and race go, because I have friends who are not racist in any classical sense, but as soon as liberals started calling them racist because they weren't jumping on board the Democrat train, that all that did was encourage them to vote for Trump and to vote, to go further. It's like, oh, you guys have clearly lost your mind in how you're going to label me, so I'm going to go further this way. It's strategically unwise. And when, I would love to give a lecture on, well, I'm not the right guy to do it, but I would love to have a public lecture out there that talks about the difference between implicit racism and explicit racism, the difference between, overt biases and covert biases, the difference between institutional systemic racism and the cultural racism, where you might not even realize it, but if you see, it's xenophobia. It's somebody that's different from me. And I saw some really good studies recently that weren't just about race, but included race as a component, where they divided volunteers up into different groups. And these were mixed groups of both political ideology, of race, of gender, and other things, and let them socialize together. And then had them compare themselves to this other group, which had an almost identical makeup. And now, instead of being divided down lines that they would have normally been, this created a new in-group, out-group dynamic where, oh yes, my group has people of different races, gender identities, et cetera, and so does this other group, but they're different from us. They don't agree with us. They're, when they were asked, what are these people's positions most likely to be, they were viewed more negatively and more different, even though the dynamics of the group were ultimately the same, which shows that all of our biases and all of our bigotry are malleable, which is why an anti-gay Republican senator who finds out that their niece or nephew are gay will suddenly change their position on marriage equality. It's the reason why my mom, who was opposed to interracial marriages because she thought they were against God, her views on that changed when she discovered that God's views had changed just as soon as a mixed marriage couple joined their church and she interacted with them and found out how wonderful they were. We see this over and over again. We are fearful of that which we don't understand and fearful of that what's different from us, which is why we need atheist normalcy, which is why we need people speaking out and saying, you know what, for years you've been told from the pulpit that we are all these terrible monsters who are trying to destroy God's country and want to kill and eat babies and all this other stuff, when really we're the garbage collector, we're the surgeon, we're the neighbor that's been a good neighbor all
we're
this time.
We're the brothers, the fathers, the sisters, the cousins. Yeah. And you see us every day. You see us every day. And on the in-group, out-grouping thing, it's funny how quickly people jump on to try and label you as the other. I had a gender non-binary co-host, and that I remember I was called a libtard snowflake cuck.
Yep.
In that, and then
I'm getting that T-shirt.
and then I, the next week I had one of my best friends who's a trans advocate call in so I can ask the questions that kept getting brought up to say, hey, you know what, let's just address some of these things because obviously people haven't heard this conversation. And me, in the process of talking to one of my best friends, right, asking these questions so that they could be answered, I was called a bigot and a homophobe and all of this. And it's absolutely wild how quickly people move into that. But before we move on to the next call, I do want to thank those patrons. So it's that time where we thank our patrons. Our top 5 patrons are Neil, thank you, Nando, Austin, Lynette, and Joe Roll. It's because of your donations. It's because of your supporting us on patreon.com/talkheathen that we're able to keep doing this, that we're able to have awesome guests and put on awesome events and support other shows and things that are going on. One of those things you're going to get to see after the Atheist Experience tonight, which is going to be the video of all of the speeches from Atheist Day. So thank you so much to those who do contribute. Thank you so much to those who are signing up. And if you can't, there are other things that you can do. You can hit that like button. You can subscribe to the channel. There are 1,300 people watching and 210 upvotes. That's a little off. Let's smash that like button. Let's hit subscribe. Let's get this out there so that more people can see it. That really does help. Leaving a positive review on Google Play Music or Google Play podcasts and iTunes and Stitcher and things like that. Help us get out there so more people can see it. That helps too. With that said, I think let's move on to the next caller. Billy in Austin, Texas. We've had how often do we have that many Austin callers?
Never.
That's wild. Billy, what do you want to talk about?
Hey, I've actually spoken to. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Wait, hold on, Billy. Are you the one who had the perfect syllogism?
Yeah, that's me. That's me. I know we had a hard time.
Well, I had pointed out a couple of errors, fundamental structural errors, and your response was, "I'm older than you. How dare you?" And
really?
I mean, your response. Well, I mean, you brought up your education, so I brought up my age.
But one of those two is relevant, and the other one isn't.
So have you reconsidered your perfect syllogism, or are you just trying to push it again?
No. I mean, I don't want to freak out. I've been hung up on by both of you guys before, and our conversations always get heated. I don't want to do that this time. I just want to talk. I was listening to the caller a couple callers ago, and you guys were asking him for evidence. What is it that convinced you?
Yes.
That in my case, I'm not a religious person at all. I base my perspective on science and evidence.
And yet you believe in a God, right?
I support the existence of a higher power. Yes.
I don't know what the hell that means.
I mean, you want a specific God. I cannot give you that.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Is your God is the God that? Me? Hang on, I wasn't on this other call. Is your God supernatural?
I don't. Well, I mean, I would think so. I mean,
why? And how is that? How is that remotely compatible with science when science cannot affirm the supernatural? I don't know about. Sorry, somebody knocked on my door. I don't know about the supernatural. That's not what I wanted to call about. You asked for evidence. Hang on, Billy.
And
I appreciate that there's an I don't know answer, but you just said that you base things on science, and yet you believe in a God.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to figure out, when science can't say anything about the supernatural, and there are no scientific findings that confirm a God, how then could you possibly claim that your positions are based on science and you believe in a God? I need some definitions here, and because
either you have new evidence or you're not holding yourself to the same standard.
I mean, where's the Nobel Prize?
New evidence.
Well,
I didn't say new evidence.
Sure.
I just said the evidence that convinced me is the genome is clearly evidence of intelligent design.
No, it's not.
No,
it's not, and it can't be.
Even if it's not proof, even if it's not proof, it's definitely evidence of intelligent design.
No, it's not, and it can't be.
Then you don't know what the genome is.
You want to bet? Hey, what's the definition of evolution? Oh, I'll do it. It's changes in allele frequency over time. The genetic code, which is
random mutations. No, you see the simulated models. Avida. Have you heard of Avida, Mendel's accountant? They have to constrain the parameters of those programs in order to make evolution work. With default settings, there's genetic entropy every single time.
You do recognize that we live in a structured universe.
Genetic entropy is random mutation that natural selection acts upon.
Wait, no, that's the destruction of biological information.
Yeah, you don't just get to call it biological information. What we're talking about here is chemistry, self-replicating models that are able to self-replicating molecules that are able to replicate. Oh my God, are you interrupting one more fucking time? I swear I'm hanging up.
You won't, but you're gonna.
One of us is done.
Finish with Matt. Yeah.
Okay, so. This process is self-replicating molecules are able to reproduce themselves, and errors creep in. I swear I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah.
It's you and Eric now. Yep. You win, jackass.
Hey, Billy.
Don't call me a jackass.
He's going to call you what he's going to call you. Billy. So were you listening, or were you waiting your turn to talk?
He's not.
No, I'm listening. He said that he's trying to convince me that molecules self-replicate themselves. Nothing in this universe replicates itself. That's impossible. Okay.
How can you make a broad statement like that, Billy? I mean,
tell me, if I have a DNA molecule all by itself,
you do realize DNA is not a molecule, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
DNA molecule. Yes, it is.
And it's self-replicating.
Hold on, molecule, atom. I was thinking atom. Sorry.
Yeah, it's self-replicating.
How does it replicate itself?
You should go look up what self-replicating means. It doesn't mean I swear, Billy. I swear, we're done. It doesn't mean it replicates itself out of itself. It means it is able to copy itself given other raw materials.
Given other raw materials.
Yes.
I mean,
chemicals.
Replicating itself.
It is
not replicating itself.
Okay. That's what self-replicating means in science. If you gave a shit and understood about science, you would already understand this, and you would not be trying to argue again. Well, I'm so done.
Yeah.
Happy birthday to me. Go away.
Why does this?
Billy?
Why does it always?
One of us is walking off this show.
You're not walking off the show. I'm gonna talk to him for a minute. Billy.
Why does it always go like this, dude? I'm a very calm person, and then suddenly, like, I bring up a couple things.
Because here's
it always devolves like this.
Billy, I'll tell you why. Billy, I'll tell you why. Are you listening?
Tell me why, please.
So the reason why is because we're open to listening and talking about these specific things, and we're both open to being wrong. What you don't see, though, is us stubbornly sitting behind something and then, scoffing and making fun, and, we're trying to move forward. But in this circumstance, I'm happy to tell you, I'm not an expert. Neither are you. Go to the university. You're in Austin, Texas, and go learn for yourself. You are an expert.
Yes, I am an expert. I study this every day.
Then obviously, you need.
Even though I don't have your education, even though I don't have your education in Logic 101, I can still know what affirming the consequences without going to school to know.
Okay, hold on. Then you wouldn't have done it when you provided your syllogism.
I didn't do it.
Yes, you did.
Actually, this kind of comes from something that I learned from Matt a long time ago. I know he probably doesn't want to talk to me or whatever, but
you're with me. You're talking to Eric Murphy. What did you learn from Matt?
Well, it's based off of something that Matt said, a long time ago, or in one of our calls when he said that science can't investigate the supernatural.
I said it 5 minutes ago.
I'm just saying that my syllogism, my perspective was born from that statement, and
unfortunately, it died when you submitted it.
You can tell me this too, since you did have a formal education. Maybe I am wrong. I'm willing to accept that.
Awesome,
but
I'm willing to accept that too. That's a wonderful place to start. Please take that into the relevant department and get it looked at, get it checked out, find out what the evidence is, and then call back. Matt, happy birthday. You can drop the call.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Yay. All right. Take it into where it's relevant. I'm not a biologist. Are you a biologist?
No.
No. So if you want to talk biology, chemistry, go to where it is. You have access. And then from there, bring it forward. But
meanwhile, the people who are experts in this, many of whom are my friends, like Richard Dawkins, would have hung up on you even quicker, because as he would have been trying to explain self-replicating modules, if you were sitting in the background saying no, 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 no into the ear the whole time this was going on, if Richard hadn't reached to hang up for that, I would have done it for him.
Well, thank you for being patient, Matt. I know it can be frustrating, but hearing that argument, well, no, you're wrong. Instead of at least listening or finding out exactly what it is going on, finding out where those differences are, and then moving forward. The fact is, in this circumstance, he holds a position that needs to be backed up, because that's not what's borne out by the evidence currently.
Back it all the way off a cliff.
Back it all the way over to the university, convince the experts, and then bring it back to us.
There are a few things more frustrating than watching Dunning-Kruger in action, to the point where someone is convinced that they're now an expert because they've spent so much time studying this. It doesn't mean you studied it correctly, and it doesn't mean you know what's going on. And when you say something as stupid as, no, DNA is not a self-replicating molecule because it doesn't create a copy of itself from itself, that demonstrates how little you understand what is actually meant within science when we say that something is self-replicating. The fact that it can create a copy of itself doesn't mean that it does it magically without accessing other materials. That's your view. See, science is this notion that, hey, we can't demonstrate that there's anything magical or supernatural, so we don't get to rely on those. And so we look at these things and figure out what mechanisms are most probable. Science doesn't make proclamations of truth. It doesn't say this is the gospel. It doesn't say it's absolutely certain. Instead, it says, here's our best explanation given the available evidence. And when you have something like evolution, which is the cornerstone of biology, which is supported in many different disciplines as the best model, you've got to come up with something that undermines it more than, well, when I look at the genome, it looks like evidence of intelligent design to me, because that's not going to fly in academia because it doesn't have good academic standards. And what you are not convinced of is completely irrelevant to what is or isn't true.
Yeah, it's a model. It's not we're working with a model. We're working with a process. If you want to counter that, if you want to have a different explanation, that's fine, but have that process, because the process that we're working with has predictive power. We're able to use that model to go, okay, if this is true, we should find evidence in these other relevant fields. And just like you said, Matt, we are able to find that evidence in other relevant fields. So you're not only needing to come up with that explanation that has that predictive power, but it's also going to need to explain all of the things that we're already able to explain.
So jot down his number, because while Eric might be happy to talk with him in the future, I don't want him calling the Atheist Experience because of this. This is one clear, easy reason right here.
Well, Matt,
hang on.
Oh, go ahead.
I was getting to the reason.
Go.
If you thought you had a reasonable argument against evolution, you would not be calling into a local fucking atheist show. You'd be addressing the scientific community.
I like it. That was a mic drop moment. You actually got a happy birthday $50 donation.
Oh, great.
People saying thank you to us. And
that's why Vern put these mics on little stands and stuff so that I don't drop them.
We also had a $10 donation. Somebody said that they joined when they first saw EJ guest hosting and asking if EJ is going to come back. I spoke to EJ. Yes, they will be coming back. Should we test Matt's patience a little bit more?
Sure. My patience is fine, except for people that I've already expended it all on.
Okay. Clip that, and then let's put that up against this next call, because I saw Saad in Pakistan. Saad in Karachi. You're talking to Eric and Matt. Hey,
Saad.
So, Matt,
I'm so glad to talk to you again.
Happy to talk to you, too. So, Matt, last time Saad called in, it was toward the end of the show, and Saad had said that there was a lot of scientific evidence that is found in the Quran, which makes the Quran, true. And so we said, hey, could you give us some of that evidence? Let's investigate it. And Saad said, well, I actually don't have that on me. And so we invited them to call back.
Cool.
And so Saad is calling back.
Can we make sure we cautiously go through one thing at a time and not like 20 things?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think Saad would understand that we'd have to, piece them through. Right?
Oh, okay.
All right. So what evidence did you want to bring forward today?
Well, first is on embryonic development. So there's this, so the chapter is from the Quran. It's chapter 23, verse 12 to 14.
Okay. Is this where it describes the embryo as looking like chewed gum?
Yes.
Yeah. How is that remotely scientific evidence of anything? Because, and I'm asking this, do you think that people there at that time had never seen an embryo?
Well, they hadn't, but God had.
No, why would you? Okay, see, this is a problem with people in modern culture, especially city people, who think that people who were farmers and ranchers
a long time
ago
did
not see embryos. Miscarriages happen all the time with animals and with humans. The very notion that at any point in recorded history there was nobody who was familiar with what an embryo looked like is bizarre. It's absurd. We've always known what we knew about it specifically is perhaps subject to debate. But saying that there's an embryo that looks like chewed gum is not surprising. And it doesn't enlighten us about anything at all that's scientific. So here's a passage that isn't remarkable, and yet you're viewing it as if there's some profound scientific information there when there's not.
Hello?
Well, yeah. In my opinion, well, I can understand where you're coming from, but 1400 years ago, back in when the Arabs back then there were a lot of illiterate people over there. There were really no scientists or doctors or engineers back then.
Do you think that
Did I mention scientists or doctors?
Yeah, saying
Not
something
once.
looks like chewed gum is not scientific.
But also, I didn't mention science or doctors. I mentioned farmers and people. Miscarriages happened at an astonishing rate back then, and anybody who was a rancher knew about this. We knew about breeding even before we knew about genetics. This is how we ended up with domesticated animals and dogs. How many people have cracked open a chicken egg? I did this just 3 or 4 weeks ago with an egg that came directly from the grocery store. Crack it open, there's an embryo in it because we can't catch all of them.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
That's gross, by the way.
To point to this passage and say, hey, look, the Quran describes an embryo as if it was chewed gum, is like saying, hey, 1,400 years ago, or actually 700 years ago, people look back or some of those people then would have described this as if it was chewed gum or some sort of mass. Yes, they would have. And there's absolutely nothing in that passage that it was of any scientific value. And the other problem here, which you're going to get to when you get to your next one, is that when people say, oh, well, the Bible tells us things about science or the Quran tells us things about science, even if the Quran described the gene theory or the germ theory of disease, that is of no use to us as a pronouncement from a holy book until such time as science confirms it. And then you also have to look at what other passages were made where the where the pronouncements were actually shown to be wrong by science. So when we talk about like the Quran having passages that, oh, these couldn't have been known by people. Well, that's the first one people go to. It's the first one you went to. And yet I think that you would have to admit it's not remarkable at all. People would have known this. Some people, not everybody. But it doesn't matter who's illiterate. Or that most were illiterate. Somebody knew this and wrote it down. You don't have to appeal to a God revealing information when it can happen when you crack open an egg or when your wife or one of your farm animals miscarries.
What do you think, Saad? Does that evidence that you brought forward kind of maybe not hold as much weight?
Well, honestly speaking, you guys always have the good answers to these things. So, and plus, I'm not really an expert on the Quran myself. So, for me I all I did basically was I tried to look at certain articles. At certain passages, and try to understand what they mean. Yeah. And this one was very interesting because, in my opinion, back then, people. The only way you could get information like this is from divine source.
Okay,
hang on. No. Hold on. That's not even
First of all,
true.
The fact that it's your opinion that the only way they could have got that information was a divine source is completely irrelevant. It's whether or not you have an informed opinion. Have you studied the history? Have you seen what other writings there were? Do you know what people knew about biology back then?
I've studied Islamic history, and I know that back those were the dark ages. They would literally bury babies alive back then.
But
women had zero rights.
That doesn't answer my question.
Yeah, does that remotely respond to the fact that people had seen those kinds of things at the time?
See, you've reached the conclusion that here's a report on something, and you've said the only way they could have known that was through divine intervention.
Have you excluded time travelers?
Oh, no, God.
Well, there are tons and tons of other explanations, not just some kind of divine source. What you're doing is you're saying this is the very last thing. It can only be this. There are tons and tons and tons of other proposed things, right? Really kind of what I'm wondering is, Saad, are you investigating this and wanting to know the truth, or are you saying, I already have the truth, I'm looking for evidence that backs up my conclusion?
Well, it's a bit of both. You see,
why would you do the latter at all?
The latter to investigate the truth or to know the truth?
No. Why would you say, I have the answer, I'm only going to look up what confirms my answer? Right? I'm only going to find evidence that confirms what I've already concluded.
I'm going to tell you a quick story, because it comes right out of my show. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Harry Houdini were good friends. And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle famously wrote Sherlock Holmes and gave this statement of, once you've eliminated all other possibilities, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the right answer. And a lot of people think that this is a profound statement on skepticism. It's not. It is a fallacious thing. I call it Doyle's fallacy, because the question is, how do you know you've eliminated all the possible explanations? In your case, and this is where we get an argument from personal incredulity, which is a fallacy, you took a look at this, and based on the information you have, you don't think there's any way somebody could have known what an embryo looked like. And you also seem to think that chewed gum is an accurate description of embryo, which I would not say it actually is. And because you couldn't, your information did not allow you to come up with any other explanation, you jumped to the explanation that the best or only explanation was divine intervention. When Houdini would escape from ropes and chains, he would escape and the ropes would still be tied in knots and the chains would still be secured. And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, in his infinite genius, concluded that he had ruled out all other possibilities and reached the conclusion that Houdini could physically dematerialize. This was his explanation for how Houdini could escape. We know that this is not the case. I can escape from things and have escaped from things even, well, it's not much to say faster than Houdini, because Houdini would sometimes take forever. But I can do those things, escape from ropes where the ropes are still knotted. Would it be reasonable for anybody to conclude that I can actually dematerialize? Of course not, because they can't have eliminated other possibilities. And so you're looking at the Quran and seeing this passage, and you're committing what I call Doyle's fallacy. You look at it and you say, wow, I can't imagine how people could have known about embryos, so it must have been divine knowledge and divine intervention. And yet I just described to you a number of different ways that people throughout all of recorded history and before could very well and likely did know about embryos. So how is that not a more plausible explanation than God told them?
Well, at the same point, you're saying that it's possible that people knew about these things back then. But do you have? Let me say this to you. Do you have any strong proof that yes, there was one person back in 700 AD or 600 AD, whatever the time was, that actually knew about these things, other than what I'm telling you?
So hold on, we're not actually making the claim; we're investigating yours, Saad.
So the thing is, I offered an explanation that is plausible based on the bulk of information, the fact that we've been raising animals, the fact that we've been giving birth, the fact that miscarriages were higher, that infant mortality rates were higher. And now you're saying, you are implying, I shouldn't say saying, you are implying that unless I can give you proof that one person knew about this back then, you're sticking with the best explanation is God said so?
Well, wouldn't you?
No, not even close. Here's an example.
I would never have gone to God said so in the first place, because that requires evidence. My plausible explanations for how they could have known this have evidence to back them up. And they are all completely natural and mundane. You are reaching to the supernatural, for which there is no evidence. And what makes this worse is you are then trying to use this conclusion as if it is evidence for the supernatural, which makes your entire argument circular. So you start with an argument from personal incredulity. I can't believe people understood about this. I haven't looked into it. I haven't researched it. I haven't figured out what people did or didn't know, but I just can't believe that they knew about embryos. Therefore, God must have said it, and I will use that as evidence that there's a God and the Quran points us to it. That is fallacy upon fallacy right there.
Now, that doesn't mean that your conclusion is necessarily wrong, but it does mean that you can't get to that conclusion with what you've provided and how you've provided it. I'll give you an example that I came across yesterday. Yesterday I was at the mall and I was talking to an employee at a clothing store who said that she was positive that there was some external force that had brain control technology, and that they were controlling her mind, making her think things that she didn't want to and wouldn't normally think, and were controlling her dreams. And so I asked her, how do you know that? And she said, well, it couldn't be any other way.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, what are the odds that you've uncovered this conspiracy and that there are, all of these unknown forces that are conspiring together to make you think weird things and change your dreams? Or a far more likely explanation is you need help.
Well, let's set aside that. Let's set aside this notion of whether or not it's far more likely. My statement to you was not, you are wrong about God, and here's how they actually knew.
Well, here's. I mean, I want to put a pin in the end of this. And that is that her response was, you need to prove to me that nobody is controlling my mind.
That's exactly the same thing that you just did. But here's the thing. You've proposed God as an explanation for how the Quran describes an embryo, and I would argue that a God would know and have a better understanding of an embryo than chewed gum. But you're proposing that explanation because you think it's the only one. I proposed an alternate explanation, and now, in order for yours to be the only one, you actually have to show why my other one can't be correct. I'm not saying which one is right. I'm just saying there are other potential explanations. How did you rule them out?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, it's one that I would love for you to chew on and then maybe call back in next week. It definitely shows that, you've come up with this. We've talked about plausible explanations and what we would hope to see. Unless you have that on hand, I think that it would probably be a good idea to wait and see if you've got something better next week.
Well, I wanted to say a couple of other things regarding the scientific. Now, there's one that I came across on about the origin of the universe, and I'll get to that in a second.
About the what?
One thing
the origin
of the universe.
Oh, okay. I just couldn't understand you. Sorry. Go ahead.
So I'm going to talk about that in just a few seconds, in just a minute or two. But before that, I came across something very interesting. That's why I was thinking about it, because I don't know how much you know about the Hajj, or Muslims have to go to Mecca for.
I think a lot of our, I know a little bit, and I'm sure Matt knows more, but I would love for you to, if you can sum it up very quickly. This is an educational show, so people who are watching.
Sure.
Go ahead.
This is what I've come to on my own basis. This isn't any scholarly thing, or maybe I'm not sure. But the universe stuff is more interesting. But I'll get to that in a second. So what I came across is, for example, you see how this is it now. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it the Earth? Is it the Earth that orbits around the sun, or is it
the
other way around?
No, the Earth orbits around the sun.
Okay, good. Thanks for helping me out there. So when you're in the Mecca, there's the big holy mosque or the masjid. When you go inside, there's the big cube, the square black square cube that people usually take walk around it 7 times, basically circular motion.
Hold on, Saad, is this convincing? Is this something that you think that...
This is what you asked him to describe, though.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. They walk around.
Trying to draw a parallel. I'm just trying to draw a parallel from this, the Earth orbiting around the sun.
Yeah, that was his evidence.
Pilgrims walking around the square shaped.
Kids play Ring Around the Rosie.
Well, the sun's not black, it's not square, and we don't just go around it 7 times. So apart from somebody goes around something and the Earth goes around something, I don't know how those two are connected.
Yeah, and really, let's take a moment of honesty for a second. Is that convincing? Is that really convincing, Saad?
To Muslims like me, yes.
Well, to people who've already made up their mind, I totally get it. But I would hope that you would have the same standards that we would have, that you would want to know the same things for good reasons as we do. Because you're not going to hold yourself to a much lower standard than you would expect other people to, because I would hope that you would care about yourself more than that. Why is this so much more convincing to a Muslim than a non-Muslim? You're saying people walk around a cube.
Yeah, let's imagine that it's actually a clear representation of the sun, and when you walk in, you always walk in it, you keep going around the same. We already knew that the Earth orbits the sun long before Islam even became a thing. So how would people doing something that is exactly what the Earth does attest to the truth of the religion? And now you've got to go to what they're doing is even less directly analogous than my description. I don't understand how this could possibly be convincing. Here's something we already know, and humans mimic it, and so that shows that the Quran is true? That's just bizarre.
Not even that humans mimic it. It's just a strange observation.
Well, just my observation. So I'm not exactly sure. Like I said, I'm not exactly sure how long ago people knew about that Earth revolves around the sun. I'm not sure if Aristotle or Socrates or any of these guys knew about it. So if I'm wrong about it, you can correct me.
We did.
Yeah.
But
considering Galileo was put in prison for it, but
yeah. So Saad, I hope that you call in next week. I hope that in your next round of investigation, you don't just look for things that are going to confirm what you already think. Open yourself up to just looking for evidence and where that evidence leads.
And when you Google Quran and science, also Google Quran and science debunked, and you'll find that most of the things that you're going to find have already been thoroughly addressed with the same type of objections that we're launching. Because there's a reason I knew exactly where you were going with that verse about an embryo.
It's not because you made it. It's not because you came up with it.
Yeah, I didn't invent this today.
You know, the vast majority of the arguments that we have been had for hundreds of years. So, anyway, take care.
I have the one about the mountains. Can you go? Sorry, the origin of the universe. Can we just go on that before I hang up?
The thing is, I have a bunch of other callers I want to get
and
to.
We're already
it's
over
really,
time.
Yeah, it's really not fair to them. But I do hope.
Okay.
But next time, call earlier in the show. You didn't get on our lines until much later, and that's why we weren't able to get to you. We weren't able to give you time to explore this.
But I do appreciate the fact that you went with one thing and allowed us to address it rather than 20 things all at once, which happens.
It didn't devolve into name calling or anything like that. It was respectful. It took time, and that's exemplary. We don't agree, but I like it. All right. Take care, man.
So can I just say one last thing before I go?
Go for it, brother.
For food for thought.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave you with these two statements, these two small lines from the Quran, and then we'll hang up. Just for something for food for thought. So this is chapter is from chapter 41, verse 11. Then he turned to the heaven when it was smoke, and the last line I'm going to tell you is chapter 21, verse 30. Have not those who disbelieve known that the heavens and the earth were one connected entity, and then we separated them. I'll just leave you at that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Take care, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. So my thing is, when you ask a question like, have not people gone on to heaven? I don't know.
Well, and also, how much do we need to bend backwards to try and make something like that make sense? You know, how bad?
More than my back can take, but I don't have the best back.
No, you don't have the best back. But it's a contortion that if you did have a holy book inspired by an all-knowing deity, I would expect it to be a lot more direct instead of, causing people to have to try and contort to make it sound like it might vaguely be true. You can do better than that. So we've got a couple more callers. We are going to take everybody, so stay on the line, and we have more theist callers. But before we move on to the next theist, Michael and Alex, stay on the line. I'm going to talk to Stephen in Kansas. Stephen, you're talking to Eric and Matt.
Eric.
Hey,
Eric and Matt. I just want to let you know, Matt, I'm a huge fan of you.
Oh, yeah, fine.
And
that's cool.
You pissed off is probably my favorite version of you.
Well, turn into the beginning of the atheist experience, because while I'm perfectly fine now, there will be a pissed off rant of epic proportions at the beginning of that show.
Yeah, Matt is intentionally...
I will try.
He's intentionally being chill because that's the format of Talk Heathen, and you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So
I called last week.
Yes, you did.
You
said you were going to talk to your pastor, right?
Yeah, if he came down, he did not. He was not able to make it.
Okay.
So we're not able to, have that face to face, which is a little disappointing to me. But his wife's mom got sick, and she had to take care of him. And
understandable.
One of his kids got sick, so I completely understood. One of the things I wanted to talk, actually, since both of you were on, it's actually great. Something I've been an atheist for, like I said last week, for 2 years now, and something I'm still trying to get over is the irrational fear of dying and going to hell.
Yeah.
This is something
which
I
hell?
Deal with. It's not constant.
Which hell?
The Christian hell.
Why that one? Why aren't you worried about other ones?
I guess it's probably because I was never raised in those churches. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying though, Matt. Is that you've never done this, so why are you worried about that?
Yeah, my thing was, I know people who struggle with this, and I know people who wake up from nightmares 50 years into being an atheist, but for me it was really simple, and that is, how much time have I spent worrying about some other religion's heaven or hell? And how do I know that those aren't worth more worry than mine? And so I went out and investigated. When it's not like there's more evidence for Christianity than, religion X, probably more than, Scientology or Mormonism, but it was very clear that this was just a lingering thing of indoctrination. And also the other issue for me that made it easy is, what the hell can I do about it? If there's some God that wants to squish me like a bug, I can't do anything about that. If there's somebody who wants to torture me forever after I'm dead, I can't do anything about that. But as long as my mind is mine, then I can sit there in hell during the torture and know that I'm morally superior to the thug that's trying to beat me up.
Yeah, and that's something that I still do have those thoughts, of like, well, that, but then at the same time, why would a God look at me and say, you know what, because you wanted evidence for me existing, I hate you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's something that really
gave you a brain. Gave you a brain and planted you in a reality where the exercise of that brain is the absolute best way to understand reality and survive, and then made the single most important question completely immune to scientific inquiry and critical examination.
And subject you to condemnation for doing so.
That guy's a dick. Anybody that would set up a model like that, you are being set up to fail under that model.
And that is accepting that the model is true. Even outside of accepting that model is true, I think you've rationally come to the place where you recognize the harm in teaching that to people, the long-term consequences of it. The good news that I can tell you is that in the same way that, we've had people who've called in, I don't know how many times you've watched Talk Heathen, but people have called in and said, hey, I still get comfort from praying even though I no longer believe. Is that somehow wrong? And when we've talked about it, it stops being so effective, and you should replace it with something.
And the other aspect of this whole thing about a brain and being stuck in reality is the people who are advocating for this belief can provide no concrete evidence and are just bathed in logical fallacy after logical fallacy. We see it not just in calls to this show, where I'm not expecting people to be an expert in even understanding their beliefs, let alone defending them, but look at the mainstream apologists. Look at the guys that I've debated. Look at the people who have these huge platforms where they are the defenders of their faith. Ray Comfort's arguments and William Lane Craig's arguments are equally fallacious. It's just one of them is a little bit better at speaking than the other. And so what kind of world is it where not only has God kind of set you up to fail, but all the people who are coming to tell you that I've found God, I found God, I found God, are demonstrably engaged in an irrational exercise that cannot possibly lead to the conclusion they've reached?
I think Stephen agrees with you, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
So in time, it can fade. And talking about it, I strongly suggest everybody to get therapy. There's nothing wrong with it. And I regularly go to a therapist. I have a meeting with my therapist tomorrow. And it's because I want to self-care. And especially when you've dealt with indoctrination, especially when you've dealt with a lot of this crap, it helps to get help in the same way that you'd take your car to a mechanic.
Yeah.
There's no reason why you shouldn't.
Yeah, I'm not diminishing the impact of it all. I'm just telling you what worked for me.
Oh.
It's an undeniable thing. And I also know people who, not even within religion, have all sorts of irrational fears. I understand that it's not just an exercise. I just did a video on whether or not religion was mental illness, and I was pointing out that the people who try to say this, when I ask them, okay, was I mentally ill when I was religious? They're reluctant to say that I was, because that means that you can basically argue yourself out of mental illness. So it's an oversimplification. There are people with mental illnesses who are religious and who are non-religious. There are certainly people who you can argue that maybe the foundation for some religious beliefs began with particular mental illnesses. When you look at John of Patmos and the book of Revelation, that seems bizarre. None of this has anything to do with how absolutely significantly impactful it can be to your life to have irrational fears, whether they're the result of mental illness conditions, mental health conditions, or whether they're the result of indoctrination. That doesn't change the fact that these things impact people's lives. And so I'm in agreement with Eric that therapy, the Secular Therapist Project, is probably a very good place to start. And also socializing with other people who've had to deal with similar issues and are probably still struggling with them. All those things can help.
Stephen, also don't beat yourself up if you think that you should have gotten over it by now. Everybody's on their own, on their own timeline, and it can take decades and decades for people to work through a thing. I know that I personally felt guilty and upset because it seemed like everybody had moved through something, and I rationally knew that it wasn't true, but it took me so long emotionally to move through that place. Don't do what I did. Learn from my mistake. You're absolutely entitled to your feelings. You're absolutely entitled to take the time that you need to move through them. You're on the right path, man. You don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
And your timeline is your timeline, so don't compare yourself to other people's, because that's not fair to you.
Yeah. And what you were saying about the? Sorry. It's all right if I'm over my time.
Oh, it was just getting a little loud in the background, so I wanted to make sure that we got to the last caller.
Yeah.
But I do want to, I don't want to cut you off in the mid-sentence. What did you want to say?
Yeah. What you were saying about timelines, that was personal timelines. That's the kind of something I've still been going over, like, because I lost my mom when I was 20.
Oh, dude, I'm sorry.
Man, that sucks.
Only like 3 years ago. Yeah, it was really tough, especially with how it happened. She had a lung aneurysm in the hospital. And I was the one that had to tell them to stop doing CPR. And I was there right front and center as they were doing it all. And I feel like a lot of my family, they've kind of moved on from it, and they're done with their grieving process. There's still not days where I wake up, crying my eyes out with grief. I feel guilty.
But it shouldn't. Isn't it fucking tragic that it feels like the rest of the world has moved on and you're the only one still broken into pieces?
Yeah, it's...
Yeah.
When you made that decision, you didn't have any malicious intent. You loved your mom and wanted her life to end in peace, and that's absolutely nothing to ever feel guilty about. I know that doesn't make the feelings go away, but if anything, I hope it helps a little bit, because I understand that can be an incredibly difficult decision. I wish we were doing a better job across the board about death with dignity and changing the laws that allow people to take control of their life and the end of life and dying process. Because I don't want people to feel guilty. I want people to make rational decisions, compassionate decisions, and then not have to suffer for years because they were the one who had to make the decision.
Yeah.
Stephen?
And what made it worse was just like a year later, I lost my dad as well.
Oh, man.
So we just woke up and found him just deceased in the bed.
And I'm very, very sorry to hear that. That's
the only advice that I can give that I feel are comforting, that I'd like to share, is, Stephen, your grief process is not ever going to take away the love that you felt for them. There's never going to come a time where you're going to stop loving them. There's never going to come a time where it's going to stop hurting. When someone is that deep in your life, then it's never going to be the same. We don't hope to come back to a place where it is just as it was before. We find that new normal, and we move forward with it.
Yeah.
But that hurt, that is you loving them, and that's okay. And you take as long as you need, because that hurt's always going to be there. We just try and move forward day by day.
when people die who we don't love, we don't hurt.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, a lot of love coming from here, man.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. You take care of yourself, okay, brother?
Thanks, Steven.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Oh, man, that weighed really heavy.
Yeah, especially considering what I'm about to do on the next show. Oh, thanks. All right, last caller.
All right. Alex, you're talking to Eric and Matt. How's it going?
Oh, not too bad. How are you guys?
Honestly, I'm a little shaky. That was real rough. Yeah.
I'll be fine eventually.
Eventually. In time. We find our new normal, and that's okay. We find the people that we love.
Yeah,
But
it was one of those weird things.
What would you like to talk about?
Well, So I called last week, and I was told to call back this week just so people had more information, which actually turned out to be a good thing for me too, because I was I had to take care of something on the spot after I hung up with you guys. So yeah, lovely way the universe works. Anyway, so one of the things that really frustrates me is in New Zealand there was a series of shootings at mosques. I think it was like 2 mosques and 49 people were killed by, several people. It was, something orchestrated by one guy who, wanted to have this whole like white power rally with a few, supremacist friends, and, they targeted Muslims. And one of the things that came about from that were a lot of people on social media were saying things along the lines of, oh, well, these people are following a bad religion and they're bad people. So, either they deserve what happened or it's not a big deal that it happened. And, I don't agree with the Islamic beliefs and I don't agree with the religion, but I don't think the way to address it is to act violently towards the people holding these beliefs.
No, and neither do most Christians.
If you think about it, we have to address this as a matter of these people decided that something about this group of people made them deserving of being killed. It's a matter of nobody is really safe if we just let this slide and we think, oh, you know what? It doesn't matter that this happened this one time or to this one group, because now it can happen to anybody. If somebody says, oh, maybe a church, I don't like these people, let me go attack them because I think that's what they deserve, or, some feature that, and it happens time and time again. And it's really,
Alex, churches have been getting bombed out too. This is something that I'm sad to say is not just indicative of where we are currently. It's a level of hate and bigotry that has promoted and pushed for violence for as long as there have been people.
It's a fundamental part of the human condition that there's going to be some portion of the population that is prone to using violence to solve the things that they can't address in any other way. That we, as I was talking about before with the study, where we create these fictional groups where we consider others othered, and they're not part of us. That can be only mildly annoying, or it can lead to these sorts of sectarian violence or violence directed at any particular subgroup. And it's I don't want to just write it off as, oh, this shit's going to happen, because certainly we should be doing things about it, but this shouldn't have caught anybody by surprise. These sorts of things have happened over and over again in different areas. And I would hope that while the world is generally getting better, I think Steven Pinker's done some good work in showing where we improve, but it's not, I don't think there's people ignoring it. I think that we are inundated with a 24-hour news cycle where it's breaking news, and none of it, or a good chunk of it, is nothing that would remotely have been considered breaking news at any point in the past. There's been a shooting at a mosque in New Zealand. Breaking news, the president just tweeted, how awesome he is. I think it's something that's wearing people down, which makes it difficult to focus on individual issues. Which is why those of us who can see these things should be actively working to put people in positions of authority who are actually going to address these real problems and not necessarily focus on minor problems. And I don't want to commit the fallacy of relative privation where we only focus on the biggest issue. No, we should focus on lots of issues. We have lots of people to do lots of things, but there's no quick and easy solution to any of it. And it's not just religion versus religion or ideology versus ideology. It is about a particular mindset that will favor violent action in response to any perceived threat.
The good news is we do have some guidelines that we've found help, working towards human well-being. And I think especially poignant in this circumstance is respecting the human, but realizing that the ideas are not necessarily deserving of respect. And, we're not here in the United States privy to being able to make, governmental change. Not yet. We're working on it. But in the meantime, we can be examples of it.
I did solve the gun problem, though. I have a solution, and that is only women can own guns, because overwhelmingly these shooters and violent actors are male. So there's a lot of really good benefits.
You have never met my ex. I would not be sitting here. It's fucking scary.
You are sitting here, so clearly, there's a difference between threatening you with a weapon and actually killing you. But let's, give women the gun, and that way, when you want to go out and shoot on the range, you got to get a date.
Hey,
but
anyway. How crazy do you have to be to decide? I don't like these people, so I'm going to kill them. I mean, that's not the way to go about.
It's creating that other. It's when you rob someone of their humanity so much that you put them in a bin and you stop thinking about them as other thinking, feeling people, it becomes real easy.
Let me ask you this, Alex: is war ever justified?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know why people have to turn to attacking one another physically to solve diplomatic problems or, things that can be talked about.
Is violence in self-defense against violence ever justified?
Yes.
Okay, I agree. And I think that becomes the justification for war, because we have to protect ourselves from aggressors. And I think that becomes the justification for acts like this. They're not truly justified, but it's not a stretch to go from violence is justified to defend myself and others, to these people are a threat and nobody can see it but me, and that's how they get to justify this violence in their head. And getting people to have a reasonable understanding of when there is a clear and present danger, when there is an immediate relevant threat versus when there's the appearance of a threat, or whether your subjective opinion is that it's appearance of a threat. We have vigilante justice all the time, and there are cases when almost any of us would say, oh, I completely understand. When there's the parent of a child who was abused and molested and tortured and killed, and they go and kill the perpetrator, generally we look at that and go, wow, I understand how they got there, and that grief and that desire for vengeance. So let's not make this, yes, these are terrible acts, and yes, people are quite often disturbed in some sense, but they are not as outrageous or hard to reach as you think. It's just that you don't have the same perception of what is a threat that these people do. And so that means we need to focus more on mental health issues. We need to focus more on encouraging people to engage in skepticism, critical thinking, and humanism, so that they don't take a perceived threat and then act upon it as if they were actually in danger.
That makes a lot of sense.
I have zero things to add to that. I think you...
That's because I just fixed the whole world in 2 sentences.
Okay, maybe not skeptical. Hashtag skeptic, but
if
Alex,
only they'd listen.
Hopefully this was a good talk.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you for
calling in.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for talking.
Thank you. So next week I am not going to be on this show.
Damn.
Next week, well, we're getting graced by Phil Ferguson's going to be coming to the ACA, Sweet. Right? And
I know he's staying with me.
I know he's also. I like his show. If you haven't seen the Phil Ferguson show, check it out.
So cleverly named too.
and the financial advice that he gives, I love listening to. I'm giving my spot for him when he gets here. So he's going to be on with Jamie next week. I think he's going to be on with you next week as well, right?
I'm not sure if I'm on. He might be on with Tracy. I'd have to look.
Well, either way, we look forward to it. Matt, thank you so much for coming. And
thanks for having me.
Happy birthday, man.
Appreciate it.
I've got
somebody
him locked
get my
in
walker and my cane because I'm.
Can we sing Happy Birthday to Matt?
No, we can't.
He's locked in the studio?
No, we can't.
Yeah?
No, we can't.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Matt. Happy birthday to you. Hey, I know it's embarrassing, but it's our time that we get to celebrate you. Even if
it's not embarrassing, it's annoying. You just violated my consent to whether or not I wanted people to sing happy birthday to me. Way to end the show, man.
You'll forgive me.
I will forgive you.
Let's get some love rings up and move on through. Hold on. We got our own thing.
There's the
because,
guys in the back.
we got our people in the back Thank you so much. We've got Mark, we've got Vern, we've got Kevin, we've got Chelsea, all in the back working to make this happen. We could not do it without you. We have an amazing live studio audience today. Hi, live studio audience. All right. Do you remember how we close out the show?
You start.
Okay, so we say, if you don't believe, this is your community. This is where you belong, and we're happy that you're here. We're building it. We're making it better. And then...
I know.
If you don't believe, if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We just
think you're wrong. See you next week.